understanding. I'm really struggling to think
Of one.
of one.
Yeah, okay. Christine, do you know?
Sorry, it's Kung Fu. It's the TV show Kung Fu
Oh,
with the
yeah.
grasshopper.
Okay. And what do you think the takeaway was for you at that?
There's master teachers.
There's people, okay, master teachers are around us. How about Carolyn, way in the back?
The Emperor's New Clothes.
Okay. Everybody remember the Emperor's New Clothes? And what was the takeaway there?
Speak truth to power.
Sorry?
Speak truth to power.
Speak truth to power. And is that an enduring theme in your life? Oh, yes, she says. Other ones. I heard the little red hen over here. And that's the one that they do everything and then everybody else wants to eat their food or something. Is that the one? Remember?
That was big in my house.
Yeah, that's about martyrdom, just to let you know. What other one?
Little Prince.
Little Prince? And what was that about? About a magical sort of, that's actually a beautiful sort of understanding of a childlike sensibility. What is essential can only be seen with the heart, right? It's also about loving, a lot about loving. Yeah. Other ones? Yes.
I was going to say, I remember my mother reading Winnie the Pooh. We didn't watch too much.
Winnie the Pooh.
The
Yeah.
Winnie the Pooh, all the stories.
And he had that Zen-like sense of peace, right?
Well, just acceptance of everyone and how to get along.
Everybody should get along, yeah. Okay, so we have these lessons and stories. Let's go forward. What I'm going to focus on for the remainder of this is one genre of stories. I'm very interested in gender in stories particularly. And there's a lot of different ways you can look at gender in stories. One is look just really simply at the number of male and female characters in any given story. So think about, name some of our modern Disney stories. Like Snow White. How many female figures and how many male figures? Two females, and they're fighting with each other. What kind of?
A lot of men.
And there's a lot of men.
Little men.
A lot of half men, little men. Even Winnie the Pooh, how many male and how many female characters?
They're all men except for King.
Except for Kanga, mother. Even the Muppets. Now the Muppets have improved recently, but when I was a kid, or when my kids were kids, there was only Miss Piggy, was the only female character. Which is actually very reflective of our times if you want to think of it socioculturally, because there is a hunger or a need for more of the feminine in our culture. And those are reflected in the fairy tales themselves. But the one
at the same time, I
Yeah.
think a lot of the female characters are very powerful.
They're becoming that way.
Motherly figure, like the tree becomes, it's the wise woman, what's the, Pocahontas, or no, what's the story?
Yeah,
The tree
Pocahontas.
is the wise woman. So a lot of times it's only one or two, very few, but they're very,
More
very
powerful.
wise and more powerful.
And I think it depends on what you're looking at, because when you think of Snow White, I don't think of Snow White as being powerful. I don't really think of her stepmother as being powerful. The old folk tales, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. So I'm talking about what's reflective of our current time, is that we tend to have, if you look at the roles that females are shown in, they're usually still sort of the princess in need of rescue. There's emerging roles like Mulan, but Mulan, if you think about her, she actually has to take on all the characteristics of a man to have power, and then she ends up with the guy anyway. So it's a weird kind of, like maybe that's a transitional tale. But let's get into these. So what I'm going to focus on now are female coming-of-age stories. There are a lot of them. You're going to see them as familiar. And part of it is this is a very charged period of life because the move from being a girl to being capable of fertility is scary worldwide throughout all of history. So this is when the Muslim girls get their first veil. This is when some African girls get put in a hut for 3 years. This is when we put behavioral restraints on girls. Even something like the current Mexican quinceañera is about the girl trading in her little girl shoes for big girl shoes and promising chastity to her father, saying that she promises she will continue to be a virgin until marriage. So this is a very charged period of time, and you're going to see how it gets reflected in the folktales. What do you remember as the end of Little Red Riding Hood? How does it end? Do you remember? The woodsman comes in, and what does he do? Kills the wolf and
Gets the grandma out.
gets the grandma out. Okay, so that says a lot about when you heard this story. Because this is a really interesting one. This story is over 2,000 years old, and it appears on almost every continent. Sometimes the wolf is a tiger, sometimes it's a fox, sometimes it's a hyena. But there's some version of this story almost everywhere. And the very oldest sort of written version of it comes from the late 1600s in France. And in that version, written by Perrault, who was a chronicler of stories, they all start the same. So the start is, she's given a task to take something to her grandmother. So remember, think about even just her name. It used to be Little Red Cap. Now it's Little Red Riding Hood. So you think of the association of red with the possible start of menstruation or sort of a transformation, or you're right on the edge. So here she is, she's being sent to her grandmother. She's told to stay on the path and go directly to grandmother's. She encounters a wolf. The wolf asks her where she's going, and she actually tells him where she's going. That's an important part of the story. She tells him exactly where the grandmother lives. And then she gets distracted. She starts picking flowers. And then she gets to the grandmother's, and this is where the versions really change. So the old version is the wolf eats the grandmother whole. She comes in. Of course, he's dressed as the grandma. And there's this bizarre kind of sexual sort of thing where the wolf invites her into bed, and she gets into bed with him. And there's, the whole progression where she says, "My, what a deep voice you have." And he says, you remember, "The better to greet you with." And then she says, "My, what big hands you have." And he says, "The better to hold you with." And then she says, "My, what big eyes you have." And he says, "Better to see you with." And then, "My, what big teeth you have, the better to eat you with." And then he eats her. And that's the end of the story. Yeah, that's it. It's over. That's 1697, end of the story. By 1812, when the Grimm's brothers picked the story up, it progresses in almost the same way, all the way up to she gets eaten. And now a woodcutter who happened to be passing by jumps to the rescue, cuts open the wolf's stomach, and out pops the girl. Grandma's gone, she's like digested already. The little girl is the one who puts rocks in the wolf's stomach. And so that when he becomes conscious again, he dies. So just psychologically, let's hear the difference between those two stories. Now let's go to the current version, which I just looked up online. If you look up Little Red Riding Hood, what will come up is the same thing in the beginning. Grandma gets put in the closet. So she's fine. She's quiet in there. We go through the whole big teeth, big eyes, big everything. But before she gets eaten, the woodcutter jumps in and kills the wolf. And that's the end. So just look at the progression of that story and talk to your partner for a little bit about the meaning of that story. What are you picking up from that and the change in it?
No gingerbread.